Hey there everyone, this is Michael Dougal, the Nootropic Reviewer, and during this video you're going to learn how I use nootropics during the course of the day. And I've learned through years of experience of using nootropics that the magic formula doesn't necessarily exist. You can expect to get like a 30 to 40% benefit, but compounded over time, it really does serve you well, whether it's work, whether it's studying. I've really seen results that I never thought were possible. And to simplify this whole stack, what it looks like for me is like I have my morning serving of nootropics, I have my early afternoon serving of nootropics, and I have kind of like a late afternoon, early evening stack of nootropics. And if you're like me and you work very long days, this is really important, not just to take nootropics at one specific time during the day. That's what I see a lot of people do. Or they'll take a nootropic blend, and nootropic blends are great, but very often the way that they're designed is to be taken once a day, and it's simply not enough. And if you were to ask why, of course it's because of the reason that we don't perform as well in the later portion of the day. We're tired, our decision making and our willpower isn't as good as it is in the early portion of the day. So nootropics, they can really help out with that. And then the other major mistake that people make when taking nootropics is that they don't have any sort of structure as far as when they're taking them, or they just take nootropics based on how they're feeling. So maybe if they're not feeling great, they would perhaps have some nootropics that time, or if they're going to go ahead and study, they would maybe take some Bacopa or something that could aid with their memory. But that's really not the right way to apply nootropics in your day-to-day. You want to have kind of like your foundations, you want to have the nootropics that you're going to be taking every single day, and then perhaps you can have some of those like emergency nootropics that you would use on some occasions. So what it looks like for me is typically in the morning, what I'm using is I'm using L-tyrosine, I'm using alpha-GPC, I'm using Noopept, I'm using Paracetam, I'm using Aniracetam, and I'm stacking that along with a good pre-workout supplement. So what my day typically looks like is I'll have my morning nootropics, and then 30 to 60 minutes afterwards, I'm getting a good workout in. So if you look at this stack and the way that it's designed, you'll notice that it's good for focus, it's good for motivation, it's definitely good for energy levels, and I've actually avoided herbal nootropics, things like Rhodiola rosea, Bacopa mineri, ashwagandha. I have learned, and this is just myself, that I don't feel the most energetic version of myself after ingesting herbal supplements. So for that reason, I take them later in the afternoon, but for the morning stack, this really serves me well. And what my pre-workout formula typically consists of is vitamin B. It's got a good serving of caffeine there. It's got some beta-alanine, some creatine, all the things that are going to be responsible for me having high energy levels and being able to focus during my workout. And I do practice intermittent fasting, so I'll typically fast until the early afternoon. And you'll find that with the majority of nootropics out there, and especially the ones that I've talked about in this video, are good whether you're in a fasted state or you're in a fed state. In fact, you can make the argument that some of these nootropics are actually more noticeable when you're in a fasted state, like L-tyrosine or like N-acetyl L-tyrosine, which is the other variation of L-tyrosine. And so I would take this morning nootropic stack, maybe 9 a.m., maybe 10 a.m. I don't want you to get too hung up on the actual timing of the supplements. What's more important is the spacing of the supplement servings. For instance, I'm typically taking about 5 hours from the first ingestion of nootropics to my second ingestion of nootropics, and then the third ingestion of nootropics, I'm waiting 4 hours after that. So what that looks like is I take my morning nootropics, of course, because I'm having it with the pre-workout. With the pre-workout supplement, you generally have to wait about 30 to 45 minutes for it to really kick in, and then post-workout, I'm getting good productive work done. And when I start to feel a little bit of fatigue, which usually is about 5 hours after my initial serving of nootropics, then that's the point at which I'll take my afternoon stack. And my afternoon stack is very similar to my morning stack. The only major difference is I do not have any caffeine in the early afternoon or the late afternoon. I simply have my good caffeine serving first thing in the morning, and then what happens is early afternoon when I'm taking my nootropics, I'm more so getting energy from herbal supplements. So what that looks like is alpha-GPC, Noopept, I'll take Paracetam, and sometimes I'll use the other racetams, just depending on which ones that I have in stock, them being Pramiracetam, Oxiracetam, or Aniracetam. But I think if you have Noopept or you have Paracetam, then you should be okay. And then some of my favorite nootropics to take in the afternoon would be Lion's Mane. I'm taking the 8-to-1 dual extract from Nootropics Depot. I take Rhodiola rosea, I take Bacopa, and depending on how I'm feeling, I will take ashwagandha. I have found that ashwagandha makes me calmer, but depending on how I'm feeling and what kind of work that I have going on that afternoon, like perhaps if I have to get out and meet people or I have to make calls, then I don't always take the ashwagandha because it makes me too calm that I'm not as motivated as I want to be to get the work done. So if that's the case, I'll simply stick to my Bacopa and my Rhodiola rosea because these two nootropics are really, really good at fighting stress. If you're somebody that gets a little bit too tired in the early afternoon, don't be too hard on yourself. It's pretty common. In fact, they say the most unproductive time is between 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. But if it's really bad, you can always consider taking some Rhodiola rosea. I like taking about 500 milligrams. That works for me. Really good for fatigue, for stress. It also works well as an appetite suppressant. And then what it looks like for me about 4 hours later is I take pretty much the same nootropics as I took in the afternoon dosage. However, the only difference is in the evening serving of nootropics, I am using ashwagandha. I'm typically taking 300 to 500 milligrams of the KSM66 extract. And if you'd like to learn more about the different variations of ashwagandha, I would recommend you watch this video right over here where I explain them. And this nootropic serving, I'm not always in the mood to take it, but that extra bit of discipline to go ahead and take those nootropics, it always serves me well because it feels like a break. My mind feels clear. I'm able to fight off stress and I can get that important work done in the evening versus just grind it out and not enjoy the process. It really does make it more enjoyable. But let's talk about some variations that I make to this nootropic stack depending on how I'm feeling or depending on how the day goes. First, let's talk about caffeine. And I have a general rule of I never exceed 400 milligrams of caffeine during the day. So I do take a lot of caffeine pre-workout. Very often it's 300 milligrams to 400 milligrams, which I do not recommend. But what happens is perhaps if I'm a little bit tired in the afternoon and I only ingested about 300 milligrams of caffeine in the morning, then I would go ahead and take about 100 milligrams of caffeine along with my afternoon serving of nootropics. Of course, I don't leave it any later to that because caffeine definitely does keep me up and we're all different. You may be somebody that can ingest caffeine prior to sleeping. I wouldn't recommend you to. And the other adjustment that I sometimes make is if it is the later portion of the day and I'm starting to feel tired, of course, I don't want to ingest caffeine. It's going to keep me up. So I have found a really good stack that works well with me. And what that stack looks like is L-tyrosine, another serving of alpha-GPC, and phosphatidylserine, which are 3 great nootropics at fighting stress and helping to re-energize you. Phosphatidylserine is naturally occurring. You can get it through diet, but the best way is to take it through supplementation form. And there's a lot of research showing its benefits when it comes to cognition, not only for elder people or people with some sort of cognitive impairment, but younger individuals like myself. If you're in your 20s or your 30s, you will see results from taking it, especially when you're in a stressed out state. I'm looking at examine.com. We can see benefits with cognition, cognitive decline, memory. And you'll find like the more stressed out you are, the more fatigue you experience, the more you'll notice phosphatidylserine working. And the same thing can be said about L-tyrosine, being very good for handling stress. It kind of feels like caffeine without the negative side effects because of the fact that you get the physical energy, you get a good 90 to 120 minutes of concentration after you ingest L-tyrosine, specifically when you're in a fasted state. When you eat it with a meal, it doesn't have the same benefits. And so in a practical sense, let's say it's the evening, you don't want to have dinner yet because you've got some work to do. You can just take a little bit of L-tyrosine, have some phosphatidylserine, have some alpha-GPC. It will energize you. It will allow you to really boost your concentration and to get that work done. So that's the way in which I use it. And then how my nootropic regimen can change otherwise is I do still use Nootropic Blends. There may just be an odd afternoon when I ditch my nootropics that I've been taking and I'll take like a Nootropic Blend, something like Quality of Mind. I like to have some fun. I am human, and that's my definition of fun, trying some nootropic blends because there's so many great ones out there, so I'm not necessarily against them. And then the other time I use nootropic blends is when I'm actually traveling out of the city. Of course, I'm not going to bring all my nootropics with me that way. And then I'll typically use phenylparastam, maybe modafinil once to twice a week, depending on how I'm feeling. Maybe I have a tired day, maybe there's a day when I'm traveling. Those are the times when I need a little bit more energy and I'm willing to actually compromise things like my emotional intelligence. Because believe me, stimulants, they really do that. They will not allow you to talk to people and connect with people in the same way that you would have had you not taken those stimulants. And yes, I do take time off from nootropics because I travel pretty regularly. But when I travel, more often than not, I'm not bringing any nootropics with me. In fact, that's the period in which I take time off from nootropics. I'm really not too strict about when I should be taking breaks or when I should be cycling off of them. I just count on the fact that I'm going to travel eventually because I travel pretty often, and that's my time in which I typically do take time off from nootropics. But if you're just starting with nootropics, a general rule of thumb for most nootropics that works well for people is taking them 2 months on, followed by 2 weeks off. I wouldn't recommend you go like weekdays on and weekends off because often you need to take the nootropics for a considerable amount of time for them to really be saturated in your system and for you to wake up and actually start feeling the benefits. And it really does happen. And I really didn't talk about each nootropic in depth during this video or even give you the serving size. So I'm sure you can find a dedicated video on my channel. But what you can do is you can watch this video here where I rated a number of nootropics from a scale of 1 to 10. So you can best identify which nootropics might be the right fit for you. You don't have to get started and take all these nootropics at once. I consider myself a pretty experienced user, 10 plus years. That's how long I've been taking nootropics, and I'm going to continue. And if you haven't given them a shot, give them a shot. You will see a benefit. Sometimes it's like you take nootropics and then you stop taking them, and when you stop taking them, that's when you notice, as a matter of fact, they were doing more good than you had noticed when you were on them. So I have gone through so many periods being on nootropics, being off nootropics, that I can trust nootropics definitely do work for me. And I really hope that they work for you as well. And if you did get value from this video, consider subscribing. Make sure to drop a comment. And hey, if you'd like to chat with me one-on-one, you can do so over on Patreon or send me a direct message on Instagram. I thank you for your interest in nootropics. Don't forget to visit our Discord server where we have a 24/7 chat room. We're answering everyone in a time-sensitive fashion. And I look forward to seeing you all next time.